2026 is a massive year for Brian Schottenheimer. We'll tell you why next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. He is Landon McCool. And on today's show, we are answering your Twitter questions, including what will be the role for Jaishawn Barham this year as a rookie. We'll talk about Jake Ferguson potentially competing for his job. But Landon, I want to start with this question first from Goran. He wants to know, is the most realistic worst case scenario for the Cowboys that Christian Parker is good, but we're still unsure about Brian Schottenheimer at the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, that would be rough, you know. I mean, I think that I think it would be helpful in that situation that you'd have to think that your record isn't necessarily very good. So maybe that kind of dampens Christian Parker's potential head coaching opportunities. Because I'm assuming that in this scenario, the concern is that you potentially lose Christian Parker to a head coaching job, and that you're stuck with Schottenheimer, who you're not sure about, right? But I think
I could 100% could see happen, because everybody that's talking about Christian Parker all believes he's a future head coach, and a lot of times these guys get jobs faster than you would anticipate.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly feels like he's in striking distance of a head coaching job. So I think that I think it would, you know, be a difficult needle to thread, you know, to be good enough on defense while Schottenheimer was bad enough for, you know, for us not to feel good about that whole situation and for us not to win enough games, so that, you know, you still have Christian Parker as a lead candidate for a head coaching job, but also the Cowboys are not good enough to feel confident about Schottenheimer. So I do think that would be a terrible situation, though, if you kind of found yourself in a spot where, you know, you ended up like maybe with the same record even after all this stuff, but the defense was significantly better and the offense was middle of the road, and you're like, wow, how do we have a middle of the road offense with all this talent here? And it's hard not to look at the coaching staff way in this situation. Meanwhile, the defense has come out of nowhere and has lifted the team. And the only reason you have 7 wins is because of the defense. And so, yeah, suddenly Christian Parker's getting a lot of phone calls, and you're looking over at Schottenheimer going, is this the right guy, or is it the other guy?
The other concern would be like with Klayton Adams. Maybe Klayton Adams, who's already starting to get some buzz as a potential head coaching candidate next year. Maybe you lose both coordinators and you're stuck with – not stuck, that's the wrong word, but you've got Schottenheimer, and you feel like, okay, what made this team successful was the coordinators in Christian Parker and Klayton Adams. Again, I think this would be a good scenario. The only way I see them losing both coordinators is if they go deep into the playoffs.
Yeah.
But I could also see them like, okay, they get to the divisional round, you lose both coordinators, and now you're completely starting over. But before we even talk about any of that kind of stuff, again, I know that's really putting the horse in front of the cart, or the cart in front of the horse, right?
One of the two, but it didn't work either way.
Yeah. How do you feel about Brian Schottenheimer going into year 2?
You know, I feel good so far. I mean, you know, early returns I felt were mostly positive. I mean, obviously the win total isn't quite where it needed to be, but there's obviously a lot of circumstance there. I think the things in which I feel like he has a hand in, I think are positives for the Cowboys, right? Like when he got his hand in the hiring process for Christian Parker, it was a good process. Last year, it was clearly his hiring process for his coaching staff, and I loved the way that he went about it. So I think, you know, his results there are good. The results for being an offensive coordinator are mostly good. I feel like he could be a more aggressive head coach. There are times when I feel like he could go for it a little bit more in 4th down. I feel like he's overly reliant on a very good kicker, which I think, you know, we'll see if he does some adjustments there.
Well, and that was my concern last year. There was too many games where, and we talked about it after the games, I just didn't think Schottenheimer did a very good job of knowing his team. Like, by the halfway point of the season, you knew this defense was all-time bad. You need to coach in a way that either protects that defense, or you score so many points that they don't have to be as big of a focal point. And I thought in the Minnesota games and the Detroit game, they were just way too conservative despite the defense being really bad.
Yeah, and I think there are times when that's you could point to an inexperience of being a head coach. There could be times when it felt like maybe he needed to divorce his emotions a little bit from the situation and kind of just be a little bit more analytical about his aggression there. But I also think that it was tough to kind of get a solid read at times because the defense was so bad. And you had to account for it, and times when you were just it would waffle back and forth between, you can't do that, your defense is so bad, and you have to do something, this defense is so bad. So I think that we're going to get a much better look and evaluation of who he is as a head coach this year.
I just don't know. I mean, I like Brian Schottenheimer. I like a lot of the culture stuff he's doing. He's really easy to listen to. He definitely needs some more time. He's a first-year head coach last year. Generally, the biggest jump these coaches make is in year 2. After they've had a full year of running practices and running meetings, they just feel way more confident. They should know the roster better. He's gotten to pick basically this entire staff. I don't want to say this is a make or break season for him, but in some ways it kind of is.
Well, yeah. It's a big year.
And I think if they go, let's say 7-10 or 8-9 again, and it would be like the third year in a row they missed the playoffs. I mean, I know Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones aren't overly reactive when it comes to firing coaches, but I wouldn't be surprised that they feel like, hey, this is our window to win the playoffs again. Let's go out and get a more proven head coach who can get this team over the hump. So in some ways, I kind of do think Brian Schottenheimer's coaching for his job this year, as unfair as that might be.
Well, I mean, I don't know that it is necessarily all that unfair. I mean, here simply because, look, Brian Schottenheimer wasn't getting a bunch of head coaching interviews from other teams. It wasn't exactly like people were knocking down the door for him to be the head coach. He did an excellent job as an offensive coordinator. This was an excellent offense last year. I think.
Well, that's what I was going to mention too. It's like,
yeah,
he's been. It's not like you hired an outside coach that needed a year to know the roster. He's been with these guys for a while now.
Well, that's actually what I'm getting to is that the whole point of the reason that he got hired was that because of his knowledge with the team and because of his intimate understanding of what this offense does, what Dak likes to do, how Dak likes to call offenses, and then maybe even an intimate understanding of what needed to be fixed, like what needed to be modernized in this offense. I think the idea there was that I am uniquely positioned, I being Schottenheimer, am uniquely positioned to take reins of this thing and really take it to the next level very quickly. I'm not asking to rebuild the entire offense, which is the main focal point of the team, obviously. I'm asking to augment it, and I know exactly how to do it, so there should be a quick turnaround. So we gave him last year because of all the lots of circumstance surrounding last year. We gave him the opportunity. We gave him room to grow here. But this is the year that we need to see results. Like, this is the year in which everything's lined up. This is the window for the team. And yeah, he didn't get a lot of criticism for his record last year, but I guarantee you he is much more under the microscope this year.
And we're not saying the Cowboys need to go out and win the Super Bowl or anything like that to keep his job. But I do think there needs to be some dramatic improvement, whether that's 10-7 and you make the playoffs, 11-6 and winning a playoff game. I really wonder what might happen, not only to Schottenheimer, but this entire team, if they have another 7-10 season. I really wonder, we're projecting this window to be 26 and 27 and maybe 28. But if it's another year of you're 3 games under 500 or whatever, I'm wondering if we could see them pull the trigger and just completely reset this thing.
Coaching staff, I mean, maybe even some front office stuff. I really do get the feeling that hey, it's on the line this year, and results are going to be counted this year because we have pumped resources into this team.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, let's talk about Jake Ferguson, who could be competing for a starting job, according to one Cowboys beat writer. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos can show up fast. The problem is that finding the right candidate can take a lot more time than most businesses can afford. And that's where Indeed sponsored jobs comes in. Indeed sponsored jobs help you reach the candidates who actually fit what you're looking for based on skills, experience, and location. Finding the right person can make all of the difference. That's why we're talking about Brian Schottenheimer. We're trying to find out if he's the right guy for the Cowboys, whether it's building a business or building a winning team. So spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium status that it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Don't forget to check out the Everyday Club. You can get the show completely ad-free, and you can get a 7-day free trial to get all of the latest Cowboys news. Just click the link in the show notes or go to lockedoncowboys.supercast.com to claim your free trial. All right, we have a question here from Troy who wants to know, do you think Jake Ferguson could be competing for his starting job? Clarence Hill from the DLLF podcast mentioned that Brevyn Spann-Ford could get an opportunity to start ahead of Ferguson this year. Are you buying that?
I mean, that's surprising to me. I mean, I certainly think that he should be at least afforded the opportunity. I don't know if he's ready as a receiver to quite kind of take on that role yet. I'd love to see him get more opportunities and get more snaps and get the ball thrown his way a little bit more, because I do think he kind of provides a different skill set than what you see from Ferguson. And maybe that's why I don't necessarily kind of see this, because I think his skill set as a receiver is more of a bigger body who can, box you out as almost like a power forward playing tight end. Right. And I think that that's valuable, but I think I don't know that he is. And really, I say this, like, I don't know, like, I haven't seen him do this enough. Like, not that I've seen him do it and I don't think he can do it. I just don't know if he can be the kind of seam player that you want. I mean, that's really where Dak loves to throw the football, specifically to the tight end. So if we can see some more of that, look, I mean, as far as a blocker, he's clearly better than Ferguson. I think there's some questions as to, how athletic he is with the ball in his hands after the catch, but he is difficult to tackle. It's a different type of tight end to start at tight end. So I'd have questions, but man, well, I sure love Brevyn Spann-Ford. I'll tell you that much.
All right, let's talk this through a little bit, because first of all, and this is probably the most important part of it, Dak Prescott loves Jake Ferguson. And I just think that's going to go a long ways, and he trusts him and he knows where he's going to be. I think that matters. However, if you're thinking about the Cowboys and what their base offense is going to look like, we projected it's going to be 11 personnel. That was their best offense last year. I think they were the best 11 personnel team in the league in terms of a yards per play average. If you really believe in Ryan Flournoy and you've got CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens, could you afford to maybe downgrade a little bit at tight end in terms of the receiving aspect and upgrade the blocker and use Brevyn Spann-Ford more on like 6-man blocking protections, if you're concerned about Tyler Guyton and Terrence Steele, keeping him in line because you think the other 3 receivers are going to be able to get open enough? Is that something or a reason why we could maybe see more of Spann-Ford this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's a thought for sure. I mean, especially if you're thinking maybe about having more Jaden Blue in the backfield, a guy that you don't necessarily have a lot of, trust, or maybe just like, he doesn't have a ton of experience as a pass blocker, and you want to get him more out and route. Maybe you plan on using your tight end more as a pass protector. And if that's the case, that certainly makes sense. And look, I'll even play your hypothetical even further. In 12 personnel, I think I would rather have Brevyn Spann-Ford as the on the line Y and have Jake Ferguson as the guy who maybe can come off the line and motion and be more of the H back and move around a little bit. So I think that, in a traditional kind of offensive line tight end scenario where you have a big body out there and you think about the old school type of tight ends, I mean, Brevyn Spann-Ford definitely meets that standard better than Ferguson does. So maybe it's truly about just how you're using these guys a little bit more. And if you kind of view them as shared starters a little bit, you're not ruffling feathers by taking Jake Ferguson off the field on first and second down because you want Brevyn Spann-Ford out there as your run blocker.
Well, and this is why I think Jake Ferguson's going to keep the job, because when it's 3rd and 8, Ferguson's just going to be the guy on the field, right? Because as much as he struggles as a pass blocker and there was concerns about drops and all that kind of stuff, fumbles last year, Dak just trusts him to get open on 3rd and 8 and settle into his zone, where I think Spann-Ford just has a lot of development. But maybe what happens is we see less of Ferguson on first downs, and that's when you see more of Luke Schoonmaker and Brevyn Spann-Ford, not only to get those guys on the field more, but to also give Ferguson a little bit of a break so you're not playing him 900 snaps every season. I wouldn't be surprised if it's more of a tight end by committee approach. And honestly, it probably needs to be, because I do think Brevyn Spann-Ford is a good enough player that he deserves opportunities to contribute in the game.
I'll say this nicely, and I think that this is fair, and I think it's true as well. Brevyn Spann-Ford is a better run blocker than Jake Ferguson is a pass catcher. Like, I mean, that's I think that means something. Like, the fact is that that's the individual skill set that you want to exploit the most. So you got to find ways to get him on the field more. But Brevyn Spann-Ford has got to clear the minimum bar for being a receiving tight end, because there's going to come a time when he's going to get thrown the ball and he's got to be able to catch it and do something with the ball.
Well, and it's really a bummer that we didn't get to see it more last year, because he had a big offseason. Like, he was ready to step into a big role. And then he got hurt early on in training camp. I think it was a high ankle injury. Now, he came back. I don't think he missed any time, but it definitely affected his quickness and his explosiveness. And he's not a particularly explosive player to begin with, but it definitely limited him. I'm curious to see what it looks like here in year 3 for him. Can he be somebody that is a decent receiver? Again, he does not need to be Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski, but just be somewhat reliable on flat routes and sits and against zone coverage.
But again, to your point, and we talked about this previously too, CeeDee Lamb attacks the same part of the field that Jake Ferguson does in certain different ways. So if you can find a way maybe to use the tight end as a different type of receiver in your offense, then maybe it does make more sense to use a guy like Brevyn Spann-Ford, who is a big lumbering guy who you can throw the ball into his gut, and I think he can catch it and fall forward for his first down. I'm just not expecting him to do the kind of big down the field stuff, but maybe that's why you've got these 3 other superstar type wide receivers that you love,
And maybe if Flournoy is doing more of the downfield seam stretching stuff, you can afford to have someone like Spann-Ford. And so if I had to say today, I still think Ferguson's your starting tight end, but keep an eye on how they're deploying the tight ends, because I won't be surprised if we see a heavier usage or a bigger rotation in that room that we've seen in the last 3 seasons.
Absolutely. I wouldn't be shocked at all.
All right, let's talk about Jaishawn Barham, the Cowboys. Really interesting rookie from Michigan. How might they use him in 2026? We'll get to that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are answering your Twitter questions, and we got a really good one about Jaishawn Barham. This one comes from Josh. He wants to know, Jaishawn Barham reminds me a lot of Bruce Irvin coming out of West Virginia. They have the same exact explosiveness at the same exact size, same violent play style, and same relentless downhill mentality. Do you think Christian Parker could use Barham in a similar way in Dallas?
We got some of the smartest listeners, man. Yeah, I mean, I do think it's a good comparison, right? They're playing in very kind of different roles in defense, but not really. I think that what we're going to see Barham do up front is especially early is kind of play more off ball linebacker than what we saw from Bruce Irvin. I mean, Irvin was truly a Sam who was rushing the passer a lot as well, and I think that what they're trying to work towards is getting Barham into those roles, right? Where we've talked about the walk technique, right? Where they start out in a 4-2 kind of nickel look, and then they'll walk Barham down onto the line of scrimmage just to add another surface onto that defensive line. So in that case, when he gets down there, I do think he will be deployed very similarly to Irvin. And I think it's a good archetype to think about when you're considering the type of athlete that we're talking about, the type of player, and the way what he does well. I certainly think that it's a good comparison because he's a big, physical, long downhill player. You're not going to want him kind of chasing running backs in man coverage. He's going to be fine kind of dropping into a zone or doing it to the flat in the hook. He can do those kind of things, but he's mostly a guy that you want chasing the football, whether it's the quarterback or the running back. You want him attacking downhill to go get the quarterback, the person with the ball.
We don't really have any of these players anymore in the NFL that kind of move back from linebacker to edge back and forth. I mean, Zach Bond from the Eagles was a former edge player, but he made the full-time transition over to off-ball linebacker in 2024. So it's not even the same. I'll give you one guy that does do it, and it's Frankie Louvu in Washington, who had about 300 pass rush snaps, I think, last year. Now, a lot of those are as a blitzer, but they and Quinn realized like this is somebody that's really good at coming downhill, and we can move them all around a little bit. I'm going to be curious to see how Christian Parker deploys him. But yeah, I think you're right. Like, could we see him be a Sam linebacker in, base defense? I think it's possible. I kind of think that's what they would like Maris Leofow to turn into, as somebody that can play out wide on the line of scrimmage a little bit. But I just have more faith in Barham's pass rushing ability if they need to deploy him that way.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that he's a bigger body that, like, if you truly wanted to play him on the edge, you could do that. If you're playing in kind of if you're getting into a true kind of 4-3 with a on the line linebacker, which, look, I mean, they're going to be multiple. You're going to see a lot of these fronts. I wouldn't be shocked to see him in that kind of situation. He's versatile enough to do something like that for sure. So, yeah, I mean, again, I think the difference here is that he may have a little bit more off-ball linebacker in him than Irvin did. But I mean, I think, again, the principle is mostly the same as far as how you ultimately want to get him into the defense and attacking the offense.
Where do you think he's going to spend most of his time in 2026? Because my concern is that they're putting a lot on his plate as a third-round rookie. I'd almost like him to find one spot and then give him more opportunities elsewhere, once he learns the playbook. But where do you think he's going to play primarily at this year?
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be kind of in this Mike. It's all kind of the thing that makes me less concerned about it is that because it's all kind of tied together with the way they play the Mike and the way that they will walk him down and have them attack anyways. Like, it's already part of his job description, right? So I think as far as where he'll physically line up, I would imagine it's probably more as a Mike linebacker. But I also think it's not going to be, difficult coaching wise to get him on the edge and deploy him that way on third downs. Like, what I'm saying? Like, if you wanted to have him in a role as a part of the pass rush, I don't think it would be difficult to kind of deploy him in that way without putting too much onto his plate as a Mike linebacker, because I don't know that he is going to have, like, I don't think he's going to be deployed at the linebacker position the way Overshown is. Like, Overshown is going to be asked to play both Michael and Will, like everything, and understand it. I think when you put Barham on the field, whether it's at the edge or at Mike linebacker, you're going to be giving him a very specific assignment. I don't think you're just necessarily having him turning loose to be instinctual and running sideline to sideline. You're pointing him in a direction, basically.
That's my hope. It's like, hey, when he's on the field, he's coming downhill, whether that's as a blitzer, as a rusher off the edge. Now, the issue that you might run into is you might get a little bit predictable if he's only on the field for pass rushing situations, but it's not like he can't drop into coverage either.
That's what I was just gonna say. I mean, as long as you're doing simple things in other realms,
yes.
he can do that. I just think, completely turning him loose with all the assignments and all the checks and having him be like the full-time linebacker while doing the other thing, you're right, is probably too much. But in the specific packages that they're going to design for his skill set, and they're going to have him doing like one of three very probably limited things on any given play, it is a lot easier to deploy a player like that into a situation, and instead of having to put him out there on every single down where he can get exploited. They can motion a guy out and have him have to go out and chase him in man coverage like that, where things can be really difficult for a guy with his skill set.
He's probably one of the players I'm the most excited to see at training camp once the pads come on, because not only do I want to see him like physically and athletically, I just want to see how they're deploying him. We'll get a pretty good idea of like what their plan is with him pretty quickly into training camp. I can't wait to see it because he's such a fun player.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, not to throw someone in at the end, but LT Overton is a very kind of similar situation where it's like, what's the plan here? I kind of see the vision, but I kind of want to see it confirmed a little bit once we get into training camp. He's definitely going to be – those two guys are definitely going to be top of my list of seeing how did Christian Parker design your roles and how are you guys being deployed.
All right, that is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Make sure you subscribe and follow the podcast so you get all of the latest episodes. And if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Cowboys ad-free, plus members-only Discord access, and so much more. Head over to lockedoncowboys.supercast.com to join the club. And for those of you on video, we can send you the first ever 24/7 national NBA YouTube channel. And on audio, make your second listen the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Have a great weekend. We'll see you right back here on Monday.